Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, how was the first week of the NFL offseason for the book, and what, if anything, has filled the football void at Prime Sports and BetChris?
As expected, pretty quiet week, bit of a run on balances, but yeah, it's business as usual. What were the sports that played the most? There was a lot on tennis. We didn't actually have very good results on tennis last week. Winter sports picking up a little bit. Surprise, surprise. But generally, again, there's college basketball going on. There's NBA still going on. It's, just back to what February is, post Super Bowl, pretty much madness. Pretty much year after year, it kind of just gets back to the same rotation, except we have a Winter Olympics going on. I think it's still going on. I was so prepped, so ready for the Winter Olympics, and I've been so busy, so much moving around that I've hardly watched any of it. The last thing I saw was some big collapse from an American skater that was meant to be a massive favorite and blew it. But
really, you're gonna do that? Like Northern Virginia's own, my daughter's classmate at George Mason University, Ilya Malinin. My 10-year-old daughter is crushed by that, and that's what you're going to lead our show with?
That's what I thought. That was the headline, and I just imagined that it was a big favorite, and hopefully we laid him, and hopefully we got something out of it, and we'll
It was the only thing that I thought was a positive about it, but I can't really say to a 10-year-old, like, well, honey, he was a huge favorite, so that must have been awfully good for Daddy's sportsbook. She doesn't understand things that way.
But yeah, I mean, it's a peaceful time right now. Just get through the, remainder of the college basketball, get ready for about 30 days or so away from March Madness. Golf actually did some good volume. We actually had a good result on that. But yeah, it's just February business as usual, kind of prepping for March Madness, prepping for NBA playoffs. And this year, fancy, we have a big event in the Summer World Cup, which tickets have started to go on sale. Absolutely insanity. I did find one game that I want to go to, Australia versus USA. So that's the thing I'm hunting down right now.
All right, as you hunt that down, we may be seeing a temporary slowdown in the action, but not in the headlines. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs has proposed a plan for the Grand Canyon state to increase tax revenue by charging sportsbooks more to do business as part of the fiscal year 2027 executive budget. Per SBC Americas, the budget proposes increasing Arizona's tax rate on sports betting from 10% to 45% of handle for sportsbooks reporting more than $75 million in monthly handle. This would directly affect the big players, think FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM, based on the most recent revenue report available from November, while operators below that $75 million monthly threshold would continue to be taxed at 10%. Adam, with Arizona being the only state where BetChris is currently licensed and operating, how do you view this proposal and what it could mean for the future of BetChris in the state?
So, as you just stated, we're an operator in Arizona. I will mind my P's and Q's. I'll let Joe get more technical on, the economics and whatnot of this. However, absolutely fucking madness. Like, where did they come?
And that's minding the P's and Q's.
Where do they come up with this stuff? How do they think it? Do they not understand that currently they are under massive attack from prediction markets? DraftKings even come out and said people don't know the difference. Like, what are they thinking? Now, I'm going to throw Arizona under the bus a little bit here because 4 months.
Are we trying to keep that license, or are we just going to try and shit can it all away?
No, listen, I will say this. From all the regulators I've had conversations with, Arizona have been one of the best to have open conversations about how to be better. And yes, understanding, and Joe's been my educator in this, legislators and governors are different than regulators that are generally handed a pile of shit and said, make something out of it. These regulators have been great to talk to, great to deal with, and, on and on and on. However, for months, they kept sending these heavy-handed letters out constantly, at least maybe it was every few weeks, once a month, about if you do predictions, you're out. Well, DraftKings are doing predictions, Fanatics are doing predictions, FanDuel are doing predictions. I don't see anyone getting booted. I don't see anything publicly being done.
Underdog is out.
Little old underdog, no headlines, probably very little revenue and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of hard to take a lot of this stuff serious. More and more states are doing this. Do they not realize that, and even Sport Trade have gone forward and sort of going after a license to do more of the CFTC stuff and things like that. And they're an operator in Arizona. I know there's been conversations about iGaming in Arizona for probably a year. Like, why the hell are they attacking sports betting? Leave little old sports betting alone. Like, if you want to get more revenue, go do the iGaming thing. Destroy your, citizens, your economy, all those kind of things. Just go after that stuff with the iGaming stuff. Milk it another way. Sports betting isn't the way to just keep tacking on and trying to drain it out, because now there's a predictions market, and the announcement or the message a few days ago is it's here to stay. So I'm at a loss why they do this. Again, maybe DraftKings and that, this is a way to go after them, saying, we're going to charge you more. And I mean, will we get to a Saturday afternoon and we'll be at $74.999 million of handle and go, we're shutting down for the weekend or at the end of the month or something? Because, if we're having a good month, why are we going to want to ramp that up to 45% when it's 10%? And I would probably actually, just to make a statement, go, we're turning off all the games. Should we get that big and whatnot? I don't know. Again, Joe's more politically savvy and will sort of lay this out in a different way. And as I said, Arizona's been great to deal with on a regulatory level, but just like a random $75 million number and then 45%, come on now.
All right, so that was Adam minding his P's and Q's. And Joe, it's Ash Wednesday, so you might want to be on your best behavior as well. But you have shared your initial point of view to the Arizona proposal on Twitter. And it's also worth noting Michigan suggested a new tax last week, copying the per wager tax in Illinois. So let's take a moment to expand on your thoughts on this news out of Arizona and Michigan.
Look, this is a culmination of a few things, but mostly, I think, is a culmination of the sports betting industry, once it legalized, the lobbying effort, in order to wow state lawmakers into rapidly legalizing. The industry hyped our handle numbers rather than our revenue numbers. So lawmakers, and again, they have to be experts on like 100 different things at any given time, right? They don't go deep. It's up to you to educate them, and more importantly, their staff, to let them know, this is the way of the world. These are the facts. And the industry did an incredibly poor job of that. Some would say that the guys at the top intentionally did a poor job of it because they figured, raise the costs so high that only a couple, 1, 2, 3 companies would be able to compete, and it would kill off everybody else. So far, arguably, you could say they're successful in doing it that way. But lawmakers right now are facing, state lawmakers that is, are facing an existential threat in that the amount of money coming back from the federal government to the states for their budgets has dramatically decreased. And states are left with huge shortfalls. And because, they are trying to do this, they all have to adopt their budgets here by the end of spring, more or less. They're looking for quick solutions. Now, it's very easy to just look at the new industry that makes an awful lot of headlines about their numbers and things like that right now is experiencing a bit of a backlash, a little bit of, both public and media enmity because of our practices, things like that collectively. It's a lot easier to pound on us, especially when you have the industry, willing to accept such huge rates to get into markets like New York, right? Everybody's going to really rue the day that FanDuel, DraftKings, and the rest accepted a 51% GGR tax rate to get into New York State. How they did not think that this would echo throughout the rest of the country. Why on earth should Arizona only take home 10% when New York is getting 51%? So it's a combination of lawmakers don't understand the economics of our industry. They don't understand the economics of sports betting. When you look at the way that sports betting is being taxed, you'd say it's being taxed on par with their state lotteries. But we definitely don't have the same economics that the lotteries do. And, until we do a better job of educating them on this, we're going to see state after state after state are going to propose these kinds of tax schemes. To Adam's point, it really is ridiculous where you are going to create a disincentive for new entrants or entrants in the industry to grow by saying if you make it above a certain threshold, we're just going to increase your taxes by over 4 times. Why would anybody want to be in that business? And yeah, I made the comments online comparing the taxation rate between, in Arizona specifically, with what they're proposing for sports betting and what they do on tobacco. You know, everybody loves to, I mean, like a lot of our detractors like to call us the new tobacco. Or when you have these lawsuits crop up, their plaintiffs' attorneys are saying straight up, sports betting is the new tobacco. But you even look at the way tobacco is being taxed, and it's not even close to the rates that we are trying, or the state lawmakers are trying to tax sports betting at. And then, yes, I mean, not reading the room very well when you have prediction markets, which are also in some ways, they're going to suffer from this eventually. They're not being taxed right now, but they're out there, they're hyping their business, their volume numbers. They're not actually talking about their revenue, because right now prediction markets revenue-wise are quite a crap business when you look at the kind of money that they're making. But when you hear them saying like, oh, we did $1 billion in volume last week. And when Jason Robbins is the voice of sensibility last week, when he was comparing the way that the prediction markets were measuring their volume and reporting their volume compared to the way we do it in the sports betting industry. And that actually, you know, if we did it their way, DraftKings was what, a $1.5 trillion volume business or something like that. All this is to say is that all of this hype that's used to tout these businesses, mainly in the public markets, is absolutely coming home. And what are lawmakers supposed to do? They don't have the time to go deep on this. There's no really good lobbying body that's seen as an honest broker coming to them and talking about our business and educating them on the fundamentals, the economics of our business. They're making laws off of headlines. They're making laws off of the hype that the industry is giving to them. So until this industry grows the hell up and says, look, we have to do a better job, or this is what's going to happen. All 50 states are going to move to something like this. We won't have anybody to blame but ourselves.
All right, you guys have both mentioned DraftKings, and we'll get to that soon. But first, we'll make a quick pivot from the legislative and regulatory landscape back to the games themselves. Joe, NBA All-Star Weekend took place a few days ago, featuring a revamped format for the main event, a USA versus the world setup with 3 teams, USA Stars, USA Stripes, and Team World, in a round-robin tournament of short games. What did you think of the new format from a fan's perspective?
I think it made me feel very old, because I remember the good old days of like East versus West, and when the games were actually kind of competitive, because, you know, folks like Larry Bird and Michael Jordan and everything insisted that it be competitive, because it was there another opportunity for them to prove their dominance over one another. But the games eventually just slid into kind of like a gentleman's agreement, nobody's going to play defense kind of affairs. And now, because they did that, you know, you had a period where really what was generating the greatest interest wasn't the game, it was the skills contest, like the 3-point shooting contest and the dunk contest were generating more interest in the games. The NBA is doing everything they can in the face of that. And then also the fragmentation of younger people's media attention. How do we get attention? How do we get people paying attention to a full broadcast? So in some ways, I give them credit for trying to break it up, make it a little more interesting, maybe make it a little more snackable. But now, like, what are you going to do? You're going to watch the whole round robin tournament? No. I mean, most people are probably hitting the highlights on social the way I did and way most people did. It's a way of just, they're kind of vitrifying, I think, the content around this event in a way where the more they try and change it, the more they fragment it, the more they make it more snackable for the TikTok generation and others, they're actually, I think, decreasing overall total interest in the event, which is a shame because it used to be really a great affair.
And with that, we are past the midway mark of the NBA season and also the first quarter of 2026. But DraftKings' Q4 2025 earnings report last week and the potential downstream effects give us plenty to discuss. Per Front Office Sports, DraftKings reported a positive net income for the first time, but shares fell by as much as 16% last Thursday, driven by softer 2026 sales guidance than expected, as well as a deceleration in handle. Adam, one area of both threat and opportunity could be the prediction market space, which DraftKings has recently entered. And on the earnings call, as you mentioned earlier, CEO Jason Robbins said most customers don't really even understand the difference between a sportsbook and a prediction market. So from a customer education perspective, how important do you think it is for people to understand the differences between the two?
Did Jason Robbins just call these customers morons or idiots or whatnot? They're not that stupid. Like, let's give them some credit. They do know what an exchange looks like when they're trading on the stock markets, whether it's Apple or any of those other things, versus a sportsbook going in and seeing the numbers and whatnot. I don't think the exchanges or prediction markets have actually done a good enough job on the UIs to have people confused of what the variance is. I will say though, for me, DraftKings is still a buy. They're still the biggest sort of one in the place. I think they'll realize very quickly, like, why are they bothering with predictions? They keep coming out and saying they want 30% hold. Well, my friend, there's no 30% hold in prediction markets. And then you need your market makers. And yes, you have all those tools, you have the models, you're now plugging them into another vertical, whatnot. But yeah, it's a little confusing on all fronts. I will say, and I sort of picked this up last year on these stock prices going up and down. They go up and down for absolutely no reason. Someone behind the scenes, whatever else, is just toggling things up and down. People are making decisions, things like that. And I learned very quickly that we know what the results are. We can kind of predict what the profit and loss from these entities are going to be based on our knowledge of what the results were. So September and October, good months. Their price went up in, I think, November or early December based on that Q3 report. What I think all of them are underestimating is just how much volume, how much money Americans bet on the World Cup. I don't understand these 2026 financial predictions. I imagine if you want to get involved in any of these shares, any of these stocks right now, buying in April, May, or even getting in now is probably the key time, because I've seen Americans bet on soccer. And as much as people don't think that Americans want to bet on soccer, they sure as hell do. So these numbers are going to skyrocket when they come out with their Q2, Q3 reports, whatnot. So, a lot of these headlines just sort of pass me by these days. I try and get in and out of these stocks based on real information rather than what's sort of been fluffed around. But they're not that bigger idiots. As much as I've said for a very long time that American bettors aren't the smartest and they're what everyone wants to get into their ecosystem, I'm pretty sure if we did a survey that at least 90% of them would understand the difference between a prediction market and a sportsbook.
And Joe, despite Wall Street's reaction to the earnings report, taking the share price down more than 50% over the last year, DraftKings' Q4 revenue was up by 43% year over year. While prediction market competition fuels some negative investor sentiment, revenue growth from regulated betting hardly tells a tale of decline. So how do you reconcile this? And what's your armchair analysis as to where DraftKings currently finds itself?
I guess in a way, I kind of jab back at Adam, like maybe you ought to stop trading these stocks on real information and start trading it on narrative, which seems to be where everybody in the market is doing it. I mean, think about it. DraftKings, when they didn't make any money, they had no profit, sky high. Now they're making money. Now they're tanking. How much correlation is there between DraftKings being a profitable bookmaker and their stock price? And just broadly, you could say, you can clearly point to times in their history since they launched that SPAC back in COVID years that there has been no correlation. But again, people are buying narrative right now. It's the most compelling thing. That's why, this is why we have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week business news channels like Bloomberg and CNBC. It's for, to give, the Jason Robinses and Amy Howes of the world an opportunity to go on there and state their case for why people should be buying Flutter, why people should be buying DraftKings. And right now, there is so much noise in the marketplace because of prediction markets, because of all these things, that people are just buying narrative. And how compelling is the narrative? And they just don't really seem to be buying the underlying numbers and fundamentals of the business. For a long time, I remember being an advisor to a private equity fund, and it was talking about a particular sports data fund or a sports data company that shall remain nameless, Sportradar. And, they had me look at their prospectus. And when I came back, I told them, I'm like, look, this is a shit business. I've dealt with them for 10 years. What they're saying in their prospectus, they're full of it. You can't trust it. I don't think you should particularly invest in this. And then they said, well, we don't care about that. What will the market think? Will the market think this is good or bad? This is just a business about Joe. Joe, this is just a business of buy for $1, sell for $2. They literally didn't care about the fundamentals of the company. All they cared about, would the market believe it and give them a ride on the upside for the price? And the market did. So, Joe was wrong in that regard. And sometimes I think it really is tough for folks like me and Adam to look at it and say, like, sports betting is about being a bookie, is about making money, is about earning cash flow. And when you finally have an operation like DraftKings that is doing that and that the market punishes them for it, you just got to wonder, what is it that the market values? And right now, the only thing I can tell that the market values is upside narrative. The upside narrative on both DraftKings and Flutters has decelerated because of the lack of states coming on board, the lack of online casino adoption by states, and now this perceived challenge from the prediction market. So it's, the vibe isn't there, and that's why people are leaving the stock.
Well, shifting from the NASDAQ exchange to the Toronto Stock Exchange, in a surprise move, Canada-based platform Rivalry has announced a significant reduction in operations, including pausing player activity. Adam, Rivalry started as an esports-focused operator before broadening its focus, and esports betting seemed to get a lot of traction during the pandemic, but more recently, looks like its momentum has stalled. How do you size up esports as an opportunity, and how do you view its prospects as a betting product over the next few years?
I never thought it had any real future within the next 5 years, maybe 2030s beyond. I had heard stories when Live Golf was starting up that the Saudis were looking at esports, potentially a 2030 league and beyond, whatnot. So maybe there's something there, but didn't work out so well for Live so far. For me, it's just always been that sort of side product over there, and that maybe in time, yes, it got a boost in COVID. Guess why? There was no sports on. It was the only thing. I mean, even we had a room full of PS5s playing NFL Madden and UFC fights constantly just on repeat, running over and whatnot. And the action on those were phenomenal. It was a bit like table tennis. It's never been on my radar. It's never really been of big interest. I think there's been more than one. They're not the only ones that started out as esports focused. But a place like Pinnacle with, what they've spun off has done decent Asian volume over the years, and they've had a pretty good product. So, for me, it's probably more of the space we're in and where we're at with some of this stuff. But I've just never seen it, even now we're going back 6 years to the pandemic. It's never really been on my radar as something to chase after. We looked at maybe building our own internal models off data, but there's issues with the official data, unofficial data, and all those kind of things. So maybe one day, but not today. As for Rivalry and what they've done, I'm kind of confused on what they're trying to do. Being the Red Bull of betting or something was one quote that I saw. But yeah, there's many of these out there that are trying to see it, seeing it as a gold mine. We've seen it since post-PASPA. Even some of the biggest brands that have tried to do it have fallen hard. So just more, carnage on the roadside.
And Joe, on that note, we'll bring it over to you if you can get it together a bit after Adam's outro there. Rivalry Start as an esports operator is an example of a niche operator looking to narrow its focus and own a specific category. How viable do you consider the strategy of becoming a niche operator versus the need to gain broader appeal and achieve a critical mass as a prerequisite for success?
I mean, it's nearly impossible. Because if somebody's interested in esports, they're more than likely also interested in other things. And that means in order for Rivalry's customers to get them, that means they have to leave Rivalry and go someplace else. I mean, we've seen it, like you've had people who wanted to be like, for instance, combat sports focused, or just like I remember Samvo, which was a huge Asian operator that was entirely focused on soccer. It didn't even work out for those guys. So it's just so hard to say, like, I'm going to go niche. This just isn't a world that responds to niche that way. Like, I think as far as like the content category, I think there's opportunities for, niche as in like focusing like in certain segments of the market. Like, there could be, obviously focusing on VIPs or things like that is a great way of being able to be niche in that regard. But as far as like niche content, this sport over that to the exclusion of all other sports, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's like a burger stand that only sells burgers. Well, if they're not going to sell Cokes and fries and other things, that means people got to go someplace else to get it. And so it just reduces the level of interest of people either trying or staying with that product.
And shifting our sights from Canada to Italy to take us home, a jump ball, or should we say face-off for you guys, what are you most looking forward to in the closing days of the Winter Olympics?
Well, I kind of got it already, watching Canadian Olympic hockey player Tom Wilson from the Washington Capitals here down the street, who was kind of a controversial pick to make the Olympics, and the only reason they brought him around was supposedly was for him to, intimidate everybody else in the world with his brand of hockey. Watching him get friggin' ragdolled by some French beer league player the other day that was my favorite Olympic moment so far. And I am not kidding when I say that. He's such a thug. But I am looking forward to seeing, like, if there is an opportunity to see the U.S. and Canada in the men's hockey final. And then right now, it would be really great to see if the U.S. women have given up 1 goal so far in competition. I think the goal differential is 44 goals to 1. It'd be great to see them bring it home, but they always have a problem with Canada when it comes to the gold medal game. In between that, here in the Brennan household, as you might imagine, I'm watching a lot of sequined outfits on ice. So it'll be interesting to see if the America's Blade Angels, our 3 skaters, could actually go 1, 2, 3 here in the women's figure skating competition. But, the other favorite Olympic moment was watching the squirrel run across the course in the snowboarding competition the other day. So I think in some ways the Winter Olympics is so much cooler than the Summer Olympics because the sports are so much more dangerous. Instead of just run fast from here to there, it's like, hey, jump off this ramp and see if you can go a quarter mile in the air. Here, cross-country ski with a rifle, cool stuff like that. It's so much more entertaining. It's so much more watching the coverage. But obviously the hockey, can the Tkachuk brothers finally beat up Canada and take a gold medal? That'll be the one that I'm looking for.
Yeah, to your point about the biathlon, whenever that comes on after curling, I can notice a palpable difference in engagement if I'm watching Winter Olympics coverage at a bar. But Adam, it does seem like men's hockey might be the main attraction should we get a USA-Canada gold medal matchup. That said, USA doesn't want to put the cart before the horse. I'm hearing that Sweden may be a tough pill to get past in the quarterfinal round with a star-studded NHL roster. Have you seen any early action so far on that USA-Sweden matchup that might want to inform people's expectations for the potential of a USA-Canada matchup for the gold?
Just had to quickly ring it up, but no, nothing standing out at the moment. Little bits and dribs and drabs. For me, short track racing's on right now. I love the short track racing with the amount of crashes that they have on that and, the tactics and that sort of sitting back for the first how many ever laps and then coming hard at the end. And then always the best event at the Winter Olympics is curling. I'm sure we all look at that and think we could all curl. It's a bit like the lawn bowls in the Commonwealth Games. Haven't really found one in the Olympics that I think I could get into. But yeah, curling just feels like, and I've got a couple of boys and we've sort of thought and watched it the last Winter Olympics and thought maybe we could put together a Jamaican curling team or whatnot. So yeah, the curling's always I've bet curling for probably 20 years and the Canadian events, the Tim Hortons and the Heart of Hearts and whatnot. But yeah, curling's the sport for me in the Winter Olympics.
This has to be like 16 years ago. I remember sitting with a group of guys down there in Costa Rica, watching the Winter Olympics, watching the curling, and they developed this plan where they were going to turn Costa Rica into the Jamaican bobsled team of curling at the Winter Olympics. I think every time this cycle comes around, everybody in the industry down there starts talking about how do we get into this in a real way, but I don't know. Get the Canadian coaches. They're apparently really good at teaching their teams how to collectively cheat.
All that's left is to find a name that would brand the Jamaican curling team as well as Cool Runnings did the bobsled team. But we'll leave that for another day and wrap up on that note. To the audience, with the finish line in sight at the Winter Olympics, whether it's gold, silver, or bronze, we hope you consider this week's episode worthy of a medal. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.